gonna blow it all apart. I said too much. Love's gonna come back home.
Right, we're back to talk about another album. I'm JR. I'm with Dr. Robert again. Are you well?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes.
Good, excellent.
Recovered
This
from
time,
a mini tour, but
well, yeah, you've just come back, and now you've got a bit of downtime before Christmas. I don't suppose it is downtime. I suppose there's plenty of other things that you'll be doing, but slightly less travelling for a couple of months, which would be a relief.
Less travelling, more life.
Yeah.
Yeah, the travelling's a pain in the arse, to be honest, these days, planes and all that. Yeah, I've got plenty to get on with, and of course, it's starting to nag away at me a little bit that I need to do some writing. So that's probably what's going to happen.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, before you do that, let's talk about something else.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Feels Like a New Morning, which actually I realised is going to turn 10 next year. It feels so much more recent than that.
Yeah.
The reason I brought this up this time then is because last time we talked about Birds Gotta Fly, and for me, this album feels like the Blow Monkeys equivalent of Birds Gotta Fly. Because Birds Gotta Fly is kind of this really sort of positive, upbeat, almost glowing selection of songs, which, as we talked about, is kind of infused with kind of, I guess, an optimism about the move that you were about to make then. Feels Like a New Morning is an album that's got all that sort of, it's kind of upbeat and funky. It feels like your sort of happiest, most joyous album for a little while. And I wonder if there's a reason for that, or if, you know, that's just how it came out, whether there was anything behind that.
It was a really important album to me, because of a couple of things, big things. One was that we'd come off the back of the album before, Staring at the Sea, which was a very difficult album for a lot of reasons. It was just it was a real, the record company that we were involved in and everything, it was, I mean, I'll tell you when we do that album, without wanting to get sued by anybody, but it was very difficult. It was the hardest one I've ever had to make, really, because it was pushing all sorts of buttons, and and I just was so glad to get away from that experience and onto a label like Cherry Red. John Reed contacted us, who I knew from years, and I knew they were music people. And the other thing that happened to me was that in between the making of those, I had a heart attack. So,
I did not know about this.
2012, I had, it sounds dramatic, but it wasn't really. It was just that I didn't feel very well, so I went to the doctor. The doctor took my blood pressure, it was through the roof. So they sent me to hospital. I ended up in Granada Hospital for 10 days in intensive care. And basically it was undetected high blood pressure. So they did all sorts of tests on me. I thought, I was ready. I thought I'm going to have, this and that. They didn't do any operations or do any stents or anything like that. They just gave me a couple of things and I was okay afterwards. But it changed a lot of things for me. I mean, I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, I stopped doing anything. So I felt a kind of rebirth, to be honest, because, I was only 50 and I felt, despite, you realize that it's kind of a shock to the system, it takes it to your kind of view of yourself as being immortal, if that's what you think you are, which I didn't think that, but I definitely didn't think that afterwards anyway. So
up until that sort of age, everybody doesn't really think about the future, that sort of far into the future.
Like,
and then
you feel like Crispin says, once you hit your 50s, you're in Sniper's Alley, he's what he calls it. So anyway, so I came out of that experience and away from that record label that I really wanted to get away from. And we were driving we booked the studio in North Wales, again, my old friend Lowy, Bethesda. So this would have been the third album we'd made there after. As we were driving, we got the news that we were off the label, and the Cherry Red thing had gone through, so I was really up and I was happy. And I'd just written this bunch of songs really quickly I don't even know if I demoed them with the band. And we all met at this old cottage up in North Wales. And I think we had in total 7 or 8 days. So I had like, okay, 4 days recording, 4 days mixing. This is how it goes, bang. So it was real quick.
Yeah.
And I got, you know, and it just, yeah, it's one of my favourites that we've ever done. It's really, for me, it's in the top 3.
Yeah, well, I was going to bring that up. I think this is an absolute classic album. It's one of those ones where even the songs where I think, because obviously every time we go in between doing one of these things, I'll listen to the album that we're doing next 3, 4, maybe 5 times.
Yeah.
And this is one of those ones where I think, well, there's a little patch in the middle where maybe it's not quite as strong as it is at either end. And every time I get to that patch in the middle, I think, no, actually that's not true. It's just as strong at the start, in the middle, and at the end. There's no dips. It's not an album with any dips at all.
No, it's got something, and it's something new for us as well. There's an emotional thing in it as well on some songs that I can feel cover me. You know, Said Too Much, things which have become, you know, I mean, Said Too Much in particular has become a real live favourite. I mean, we do it very differently. In fact, I would like to record the way we do it now. But it was the basis for quite a lot of things. You know, Chained, a lot of. It felt like a new start. You know, it did. It really did. And I think
like a new morning.
it breathed life into us again. I think everybody in the band thought, oh, you know, we're getting somewhere. This is good. It was worth reforming, worth making new music, because this feels like really strong and it stands up to anything that we did in the 80s, if not better, you know. So,
oh, absolutely.
So I think it was good for the feeling within the band as well.
Chained, if that had come out in the 80s when you had the sort of big record company and the sort of hype machine behind you, that should have been a massive, massive hit. Yeah. And not the only one on this album, really.
No, Chained, I mean, we did a good, Youth actually did a really good mix on that. Well, I thought it really worked. But, you know, radio, the whole thing's changed anyway. I mean, it's impossible, who knows. But yeah, that's one that we kind of really nailed our kind of garage band, Bacharach and David vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we'll talk about the songs in a minute.
Okay.
I think there's some more background stuff about this album that's quite interesting that I would never forgive myself if I didn't ask about some of these things. And basically it comes down to Cherry Red. So they got in touch with you say, and then this album comes out and it's released as a double with an album of acoustic versions that you've kind of done yourself of sort of Blow Monkey songs. And there's a big 3-disc sort of retrospective collection comes out. I'm not sure exactly when it was, but it was pretty much the same time too, all tied in with the Cherry Red.
Yeah.
So they obviously got in touch with you and you've had a couple of revived Blow Monkeys albums by this point too. So was it Cherry Red thinking to themselves kind of, Blow Monkeys, they're sort of kind of available. They were a big name in the 80s. Here's a chance for Cherry Red to sort of improve their own profile as well a bit, I suppose.
Well, yeah, but I was working with them anyway because they were doing reissues of albums, or they've been in touch about doing reissues. You know, that's their thing, right? That's what
right.
So, and I knew John Reid from before. So we had connections there. I think it was just it was just the right label at the right time, you know. And I really, like I said, I sort of cleaved to them because I knew that they were music people, and where I had been before, it was business people,
right,
dipping their toes into music. And I thought I could manipulate that situation, but I realised that when you just get, when you get into muddy waters like that, you just get dirty.
Right.
So it was good to get away from that and into the kind of Cherry Red environment. So. You know, I mean, they're not, you know, Cherry Red don't spend much on promotion and all that, but that's why they're still going. They're about reissue and all that. But at the time, I had a good relationship with John Reid, so it was good fun. And
because actually Cherry Red, Cherry Red were responsible for the deluxe editions as well, weren't they? Yeah. So all this was going on.
They do that really well, that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And let me ask you a little bit about the acoustic album then, before we talk about the main thing.
Yeah.
I mean, so the choices are, some of them are fairly obvious choices.
Yeah.
Some of them are fairly sort of standard renderings in acoustic. There's a really nice kind of sort of jazzy version of It Doesn't Have to Be This Way, which is kind of nice and perky. I mean, there's a couple of odd choices as well. Come On Down was what was your thinking behind some of the choices? Clearly there were some songs you had to have on there. Were other ones that you enjoyed playing particularly, or were they ones that you thought had sort of kind of been skipped over a bit, maybe?
I don't remember. I think I recorded a lot of that before we did This Feels Like a New Morning. I did it bit by bit, and because I just thought I think I recorded quite a lot more than those songs, and I just put those ones together. And I wanted to keep it real sparse and just have another version of all those songs that I owned, actually, rather than BMG or Sony or whoever it is that owns us now. I don't know, probably Elon Musk.
He owns everything these days, doesn't he?
Bezos. I don't know, whoever owns us right now, whoever owns the intellectual property on the world has got us somewhere. And so I just wanted to do it myself and make it honestly acoustic, no tightening it up. So I did it in a little home studio. I think I did it in the first couple of years when I moved to Spain and started building it up. And I told John Reid about that, and they said, "Oh, great, perfect. Let's put that out as the sort of compliment, because for them it's a good marketing tool, I guess." And they did a nice thing on it, that packaging and all the artwork and stuff. They did a good job.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, because it feels like you've got a deluxe edition version of this album, and that's just the standard version of the album. So it's like a really nice way to go about it.
Yeah, it is the only one. We didn't do any vinyl of that, I don't think.
No.
And actually, I don't have any left. I was looking for one earlier so that I could talk to you about it, but I don't have any.
Oh no!
So I'm gonna have to talk to Cherry Red and see if we can make some more. But no one. I mean, it doesn't matter, does it? Because it's all the push of a button. It's all there anyway. So, but
sure,
yeah,
sure.
That was just one of those that come along occasionally. Feel good factor ones.
Yeah.
You can't force that. You just never know when that's going to happen. And obviously my personal circumstances were behind a lot of this, because when the band found out that I'd had a heart attack and all that, I think at first they probably thought, well, that's it then, we're over, we're finishing. And I felt like the opposite. We're starting. Here we go. I feel really energized and positive by this. So let's go. And we started playing a lot more live at that point as well.
Yeah, I guess something that you need to do when something like that happens is you need to pull back on all the things that are causing it, but also you need to make sure that you're kind of giving yourself a physical workout as well.
Yeah, you do. I mean, it's more than that though. It's an epiphany. It's a mind blowing change of circumstances. Everything you thought to be true is now up for grabs, and everything you question everything. Because you're suddenly confronted with the finite nature of your own existence, and within that it destroys the ego, because that's all nonsense. So it changed everything for me, really. Everything, and it has done ever since.
Yeah. Well, were these songs then written mostly after that happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, because just going through the titles, there's definitely at least 2 or 3 that are, would definitely feel like they've been influenced by that in particular. I mean, Feels Like a New Morning, the name of the album altogether is about, a kind of a revitalization, a death and rebirth almost is kind of what you feel like is going on there.
I mean, I realise it's a bit close to New Morning, which is Bob Dylan album. Which is Bob Dylan albums, but you'd have to be a bit of a nerd to know that. That's the Bob Dylan album that he recorded in 2 days while he had flu, which I love the idea that he didn't even bother to cancel the session, and you can hear it in his voice. Yeah. But this was, so it was kind of inspired by that, but not really. I mean, not in any way musically, but yeah, just the idea of just rebirth, a fresh start.
There's kind of a thing going on with this album where it's kind of again, going back to Birds Gotta Fly, we said it was kind of the most sort of rock influenced of your albums, even though it's still sort of recognisably you. Yeah. But there's kind of just a little bit of a sort of rock thing going on at the heart of it that sort of comes out more in a couple of the songs, but is there in the background of some of the others. This feels like it's got a little bit of that. It's a lot funkier, I think. This is a very funky album. It's a very sort of upbeat, funky album for the most part. Yeah. It starts off, Oh My, and Feels Like a New Morning start off as well. They've got that funky sort of slightly rock thing with the sort of guitar riff going on. And then over the top of that, especially in the singing and in the vocal, there's kind of a gospel-y thing too. Was that something that was conscious, or is that just sort of an accidental thing that happened? Because
the gospel thing is very, it feels like that's where I go to, you know, if I'm unfiltered and I'm not thinking about it, you know, one of the most important records for me, in my life has been Sam Cooke and the Soul Stirrers, and their gospel records.
Right.
The stuff that Sam Cooke made before he went pop. I don't know why, and because I'm not religious in that sense, I'm certainly not Christian.
Right.
But there's something you can still listen to that without having to be Christian or be a religious person, and be moved by the connection with the divinity, the spiritual aspect of it. And there's something in that which it's deep in me, and I don't know why, but it comes naturally to me as well. The kind of the harmonies, the feel, you know, Curtis, the staple singers, you know, that kind of that vibe. It's just the real deal for me. It hits an emotional chord for me that not much else gets to. So when I don't really think about it, that tends to come out in that way. So those songs, like I said, which were written very fast, all this was written real fast. You know, because, you know, like I said, when I got in the car to drive to Wales from Spain, I didn't even know that we were going to do it, that we had a record deal. We only found out in the car halfway through because we were going through some legal shit and to get out of the previous thing.
Yeah.
So when so that was also like, oh yeah. And it was, so I was feeling good, and I just think that when I feel good, that tends to come out because I associate feeling good with Sam Cooke and the Soul Stirrers.
And of course, then you're going off to Wales to the studio, which must start to be feeling a bit like a home from home, a really comfortable place to do it as well.
I've done, like, you know, I did parts of Bethesda and what else? Birds Gotta Fly, but the band had never been there. We had never done it.
Right.
And I've been telling them, and the guy that runs it, Laurie, he's fantastic. I mean, he's moved now. He's moved to Anglesey, which is where I was there last year doing the album with Matt Dayton. So I get on really well with Laurie. He's this kind of surrealist, you know. He sort of appears and disappears. He was an original member many years ago of the Yardbirds. He's a sort of how can you put this? He's part Bo Diddley and part kind of philosopher. You know, he comes from he's an era where in the 60s where he was the real deal, you know. So I find him endlessly fascinating. And he tends to just have the right instruments and the right microphones about, and it's not, you know, it's not flash, it's cold and wet and horrible and dark, but it's brilliant. And so it was just the right place to go and make a healing kind of record.
And it sounds like the kind of place where you've just got enough, because I think for me, when you're being creative, you need to have a balance between what you're comfortable with and where you're pushing at the boundaries. And it sounds like this place is kind of the right kind of place with the right mixture of sort of comfort, of sort of having the right things about you, but also being away from home, I guess, and being in an environment that's kind of, you know, sort of outside of its surroundings, where you can push it a bit too. So you've got the right mixture of, because it's that cocktail, that sort of alchemic cocktail that allows for creativity, isn't it? And it sounds like this place has got that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the headphones don't work properly. There's cold and wet, and it was all over the shop. But I mean, that's part of the charm, you know.
Yeah.
He's improved on that in the new one, but it was fantastic. Yeah, it just felt like a good place to go. So, not necessarily safe, because you never know what's going to happen in Laurie's studio. And the boys were like, "Well, what the hell's this?" A little bit. It's an old slate mine. It's an old house. It's in that kind of the foothills of Snowdonia. It's quite spooky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just down the road from that other place that there was the film about. Did we mention this before? There's another studio just up the hill or just down the hill from it where there was there was a film about it released a couple of years ago.
I think you're thinking of Rockfield.
Yeah. There should be a sister film about this place too, shouldn't there?
Rockfield it was near Mono Valley, which is where we recorded as well.
Right, I'm confusing the two, aren't I?
That's down near Monmouth. Bethesda's up near Bangor, up near Snowdonia, up there.
Oh, right. Wow. Even wilder then.
Yeah, really wild.
Wow.
And in between sessions, I would go mackerel fishing with Laurie, which I love, standing on the rocks catching mackerel. Wow. Which is not something you do every day. So I love it up there.
But maybe you should come back and do another one. Let's talk then about these songs, the rest of these songs, because Oh Mine Feels Like a New Morning it strikes me that then there's kind of a double meaning to most of the lyrics on this, which is kind of something you do anyway. But I mean, once you've sort of got a lot of that politics in the 80s out of the way, sometimes there's a bit more subtlety about what you're talking about. And you write things that sound like love songs or relationship songs, and really they're talking about something deeper. And you've said before, it's not really something you think about, it's something that just comes out. So, but was there anything about the writing of these songs where you thought, this is what I need to be writing about? Or was it just, again, that it just sort of comes out, and what you've got at the end of the day is kind of, you sort of emotionally purged something without sort of consciously thinking about what it is that you're sort of emotionally purging?
Well, every song's different. So, I mean, some are quite obvious. I mean, Said Too Much is literal in the sense that the wounding power of words within a relationship can stay with people, and something like Cover Me. That's there's a kind of vulnerability, a sort of humility in there that's come from my situation that I can feel in the lyric. They're all pretty self-explanatory, really. I mean, I try it, but lyrics are a mystery though as well, and they're a mystery to me as well. Sometimes I choose a line because I think it just feels like it doesn't make sense to me at the time. Like I'm not really kind of one of those guys that storyteller.
Is it a case of
it's more impressionistic. I mean, there's one on here that I really like called "That's Not Right."
Yeah.
Which I realise now I'm almost channeling sort of Neil Diamond on that. It's just something that I've never done before, and I certainly don't want to do again. But I really love that song, and I've got to tip my hat to Nigel Hopkins, who added some keyboards and a few bits and pieces to some of these songs, and they were fantastic. On that one, it's a kind of marching song, and somewhere in the middle there, he's added whistles, and it sounds like one of those orange marches or something. It's just perfect for what I was trying to get across. I don't know what I was trying to get across, but it's perfect for that song. In No Time at All, he goes off and he plays this amazing kind of Rhodes electric piano that's just, those are two songs in particular, That's Not Right and No Time at All, that we'd never been to before, the Blow Monkeys. That kind of style, they were new for us.
Yeah.
So, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed doing that. And Tony, the drummer, played a blinder on those, because that kind of jazzy thing that he can do, fantastic. I'm a sucker for that. And they're playing that tune soprano at the end. It's beautiful.
Well, that in No Time at All, it starts off with that riff, And it sounds like it sounds like that bit in the 1960s when rock was on the cusp of getting heavy. And it just, that sort of moment when it just sort of preceded when bands like Led Zeppelin would spring up. So, and it's one of those kind of riffs. But the amazing thing about that song is it starts off with that and you think, oh, this is Dr. Robert. This is the Blow Monkeys back in the same sort of territory as we had on those kind of rock songs that we talked about last time. And then by the end of the song, it's just in this sort of free-forming jazz workout. And it couldn't be further away. It doesn't feel like it could be further away from where it starts. And yet, if you flick back the back button on your CD player and go back to the start of the song, it's such a natural journey. And it's like a really progressive track that, and yet the whole thing just feels natural and it just kind of evolves naturally without you even noticing what it's doing.
Yeah, and in a sense it's related to kind of stuff from Limping. It's got the title track from Limping, or I mean, where we used to just do that. We would just, because like I said, a lot of these I just play once or twice and live, and then I would overdub vocal or another guitar or something, so that it's got that spontaneity to it. Just in no time at all, but it's got a little bit of kind of, I don't know, Jefferson Airplane or something, like you said. It is at that cusp, but then there's the jazziness. And the vocal melody is quite unusual for me, because what I did there was I took away the lead vocal and just left the backing vocals.
Ah, that's interesting. There's a few moments on this album.
So I quite like that. I read that Brian Eno, one of his, whatever he does, I don't know. What does he call them? They're sort of signposts for making records, but he has something strategies, he calls them.
Right.
And, it's kind of highfalutin kind of way, but I quite like this one, which was take away the lead vocal and just use the backing vocal. In other words, it's like when you're doing a painting or drawing, take away the main image and just leave the impression of what's around it. Because it makes it more interesting and less literal. And
especially in a song like that, because in that song, everything about it is kind of impressionistic. The whole thing is kind of this impressionism. Yeah. And if you'd had the main vocal on it, that might have dominated too much. And part of the journey of that song is that you don't have anything that dominates too much. Because once you get past the riff at the start brings you in. But once you get past the riff, everything about it kind of becomes this sort of musical jumble where all the things are going on at the same time together, and your attention is moving from one thing to another all the way through, but you're never dominated by one thing or another. And maybe the lead vocal would have taken that out of the song. Yeah.
I think the thing that I like that works on this album is that it does sound like a piece. It sounds like because it was all recorded within a few days and it was not fucked about with the tool afterwards. It has that unity.
Yeah.
We were in a certain mood when we did it, and it was a good mood, and that's transmitting through. That's all you can hope for, really. That's all. That's what music's for, to communicate some kind of connection, some sort of joy, some sort of love, some sort of feeling. Like what else can you really do, we're not trying to impress anyone. It was just trying to make something, something up, something good.
Yeah, well, you do. Yeah. What's that? Icarus in Flames, then, for example. Oh. Here's another example of a song that I don't think really sounds like the Blow Monkeys at all, and yet obviously naturally sounds like the Blow Monkeys because it's you guys who've made it. And so, but it's Icarus in Flames for me feels like, all these, and most of them were terrible, but there was something interesting about what they did. So it started with My Bloody Valentine, and then you had bands like Ride, and then there was that Irish band whose name escapes me, who did Chasing Cars or whatever it was called. And those bands were doing this sort of sonic thing, where what they were doing was layering lots of guitars, where you couldn't really hear what any of the guitars were doing, but kind of the overall sort of impression was of something that was kind of almost like classical music, where it lifts you without you being aware of what it is that's doing the lifting. And for me, Icarus in Flames musically is a million miles away from what they were doing. But in terms of the song itself, it's the first time you hear it, you don't really get this. But the more you hear that song, the more there's something about it that just kind of really subtly and without you even noticing what it's doing, it's just kind of lifting you. So maybe it's different chords that you're using or a different chord sequence in that song, something unusual that you'd not done before, but it doesn't feel like you at the same time as it does. And it seems to do something that you don't really do in a way that just feels really natural.
I think what you one of the things about that song is that I start it in a kind of low register.
Yeah.
And although the chords themselves don't change or the key doesn't change, I start to go up and up and up as we go, just very subtly.
Yeah.
The melodies change into a higher register, so it takes you up slowly but very surely. That was the idea, anyway.
Yeah.
You know, to have that.
Like Icarus, obviously.
But it's because it's basically a soul song. You know, if you stripped it down and played it on in a soul band, you would see that's what it's really doing.
Right.
Yeah, but and the other thing is that you're not always aware of how it hits other people, how what you've just described.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
occurred to someone else who listened to it. You just never know. I know this because when I play things to people like we're in a tour bus and I play something to them and I'm going to check this out, listen to them, and I know that they're not hearing the same way that I'm hearing, and likewise, we all hear it slightly differently.
Yeah.
And
I just think you have a way of doing things where you nothing that you do is ever quite straight, if you know what I mean. You never do quite a straight folk song. You never do quite a straight jazz song. You never do quite
a straight person.
No.
I don't, because
you mix the influences in a way, to me, that doesn't sound like anybody or anything else. And so even when you do something that's fairly straightforward, there's so much about it that's not straightforward. It just gives it a depth and a texture that I don't think I find with most other artists, frankly.
Well, I think the thing is with that is that is to trust the process, trust yourself. Don't be afraid. Don't be. You don't. There's not a rule book that says that when you make a certain record, these things are off limit and these things. I've always struggled with that.
Well, like you say, you were self-taught, so the rule book for you doesn't exist, does it?
Musically, I'm all over the shop. I'm not really very learned, in terms of that. But I do, it's like maths music, the way chords go together and the way you play and the feel. And the X factor comes from probably allowing whatever it is that's inside to come out. And you can call that feel or intuition. And each of us have got that. Everyone, that doesn't make anyone more special. It's just that we tend to edit ourselves. We tend to stop that happening, through fear of ridicule or failure, or this is why Bowie was so great, because he didn't mind failing, even failing when he was so big, or someone like Dylan as well, who put records out that they know are going to be slaughtered, but they believe in them at the time. And there's something incredibly brave about that, and it's far more interesting than giving an audience what you think it wants, which is death, really, to an artist.
Yeah.
My only thing is that I trust my instincts on that, and they're not always. They're usually not commercially viable instincts, but in the end, it's more important that the music moves people than I end up talking to someone like you about it, than it is that it gets into on a playlist or on the radio or whatever, because like you just saw recently, when you play live, that's really what it's all about. It's when, seeing people, obviously there are certain songs we play and they know those and other ones, but it's just about that reaction and about people's trust in you. And I'm always amazed by, especially as we get older and they get older, if I go and speak to people afterwards, the emotional reaction to the music, kind of blows you away, and you think, well, that's not really me. That's not really the band. There's a whole other thing involved here.
I'll tell you what it is. I try and put this into words, and this is difficult to put into words, but as you know, before this year, I'd never had chance to see you because of where I live and just because of circumstances and stuff. So I'd never managed to catch you live. And this year I have twice. And although I've seen videos and things, you never get the same impression from a video as actually being in the room. And here's something I noticed about Digging Your Scene. And it doesn't have to be this way, and all the other songs, but when other bands play old songs, it's like they're bringing something out of the cupboard. So it's like something that they did a long time ago and that they're dusting it off and they're doing it again. When you play Digging Your Scene, when you play It Doesn't Have to Be This Way, it doesn't feel like something you've brought out of a cupboard. It feels like something that's alive and that's been alive all that time, and that's not necessarily evolved and changed, but that when you get the guitar and the drums and the bass, the saxophone and the vocals, everything else, they're not just going over old ground, they're living the song. The song feels like a living thing that you're sort of involved in for a few minutes before you move on to the next one. It doesn't feel like something old and dusty. It doesn't feel like something from 40 years ago or whatever it is. It feels like something that's fresh and alive now. And that's not a usual thing. I think that's part of the chemistry of what you put into those songs in the first place. And it's, apparent all over this album too. These are not songs that are tied into a time and a place and a feeling or anything. I mean, there are a couple of albums in the late 80s, I think, that are, and we'll talk to them when we get to them. But most of these, and especially the classics, and especially the revived Blow Monkeys albums, they're just living things that are completely outside of time and place. And maybe that's why you don't get the radio play, because what you're doing is outside of the particular thing that they might need for any particular time. I don't know, that was the impression I got watching you live twice this year.
No, I think that's true. I think I always approach it as if I'm singing it for the first time. It's really weird, but I have to do that. I have to feel that, and we always play it slightly differently every time.
Yeah,
but not deliberately differently, so you don't recognize it, but just something on the guitar, something to wake me up and bring me into the here and now, here and now, here and now, right? And then I hear the first line. And I don't want to dial it in. It has to be coming from somewhere. There are nights when it's more alive than others, but that is the intention: is to be right there when you're doing it, be in the song, because that's. I'm not going to tap dance. I'm not going to do it. The only thing I can do is communicate through the music. So it has to be as real as possible. No matter how many people are there in the crowd or where we're playing or what we're doing, we owe that to ourselves to be real about that,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, and it doesn't have to be this way that I mentioned on the acoustic albums. A perfect example of that, because like I say, it's recognisably the same song, and yet it's got this sort of funky jazzy thing going on underneath it in that version. That's not quite what's on the record, and so it feels like a different song.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that would just be first or second take, and however I felt that day about it. I can't remember, but because I haven't played that for a long time. But that's really, again, that's just trusting the process. Just saying, no, that feels real. And a lot of that is to do a lot of the thing that I have learned, having spent too long making records at times in the 80s, was to trust that feeling early on in the process, because after that, because everything else will conspire against it to kind of deaden it, to soften it. The mastering, the compression, the mixing, the It's like you're trying to protect the original idea as much as possible all the way through the process. And one good way of doing that is to keep that very first or second impression that you make, because that's there's a spark in there that you can never recreate.
In some ways, it feels like instead of constructing songs, which is what a lot of bands do, you're growing them instead. So you start with a seed and somehow you grow this song out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, true. I mean, look, something like Said Too Much on this album, that's an early version. That's almost like a demo compared to what we do now with it.
Yes.
And the reason that we can do that now is that I know that the lyric is a good lyric that came from a place of honesty, and that I can act that out and inhabit that lyric.
Yeah.
Live.
In some ways, it's kind of a sister song to A Moment of Madness from Realms of Gold, which kind of deals in a way with the same sort of subject.
Yeah. I mean, if you've been in a relationship for a long time, the whole world is inside that relationship. Everything, that's what it all boils down to, how you get on with other human beings, how you communicate, how you can, what you've learned. Have you grown?
Yeah.
You learned some humility at the same time. Have you found out what's really important?
There are moments.
All those things. That journey goes into the songs.
There are moments in a relationship where something will happen, and like you say, in the instance of this song, it's like something that somebody will say, where you find out exactly how strong the relationship is, because if the relationship is less strong, those are the moments that will break it. And if the relationship's really strong, those are the moments that you can get past and look back afterwards and say, that was a moment where it could have all gone horribly wrong. But actually, that might be the moment that laid the cement, that built the foundations of something even stronger, maybe.
Yeah, that would be true. And songs are good places to explore those things because they're universal.
Mm. Right, Cover Me. Changing the subject entirely. Cover Me has got this keyboard thing over it like nothing I've ever heard on a Blow Monkeys song really before or since. And it's amazing. Is that a Nigel Hopkins addition to the song? Or is that you?
That's me on that one.
Oh, is it?
What are you talking about? The organ. That
sort of thing.
No, that's a melodica.
Right. Oh, is it? Right.
That's Neville playing. Melodicas?
Yeah.
They're like keyboards. Augustus Pablo played them. They're like, you blow through them, and they're like little mini keyboards.
Yeah.
I had the riff, but it needed a melodica because I think Damon Albarn uses them quite a lot because they've got a kind of melancholy, windy sort of wind thing about them, and Nev can pick it up and play it like he can do most things.
Yeah.
So that's what he's played on that. Yeah.
Yeah, because that gives that song, again, as songs go, it's within your rhythm or within your tone or however you want to describe it. But again, that thing over the top of that song makes it sound, because this album, it starts with those two tracks, Oh My, Feels Like a New Morning, which kind of got that funky, slightly gospely thing going on. And then when you get Cover Me after that, it's like all bets are off as to what's going to happen next on this record. And then you've got Chained. So it's like within the first 4 songs of this record, you've already gone wider and broader than most bands will go across the entire span of their careers.
Well, yeah. But I don't know. I mean, that's very kind of you to say that. I'm not sure that's I mean,
I don't know, it feels like it. The difference between Feels Like a New Morning and Chained just feels like, and yet, it's completely obviously the same band playing both those songs, but they feel so far apart. And Chained, actually, I've got a little theory about Chained, which is probably completely wrong, but Chained feels to me like the genesis of the Journey to You album. It feels like Journey to You was a natural progression of you looking back at Chained and thinking, well, let's do that across the course of an album or something. And obviously Journey to You becomes variations on various themes. But it feels like the genesis of that might be in Chained, or was Chained maybe just the first time that you tried that because it's that Bacharach and David thing. And I think you hadn't done that for a while, and it feels like that's the rebirth of that in your sort of career.
Yeah, it could be that there's a connection between Chained and Journey to You. I can see why you would think that. It's just a kind of, yeah. I mean, I'm proud of Chained. I think I think from a songwriting point of view, it's quite clever, and so I thought, yeah, that's good. But at the same time, I also was able to get something into it emotionally that I wanted to get into it. In fact, I think the mix that Youth did even brought it out more, because he brought out the orchestral things that Nigel did on his mix.
Yeah.
And it became more kind of kaleidoscopic, which suited it. Ours is like a sort of, ours is, it's that Blow Monkeys thing that I'm always after, which is sort of garage band, Bacharach and David. I go back to like Forever Changes by Love, which is a great example of if you strip away the orchestra, you've got quite a rough old sort of like LA garage band going on under there. But then when you put the mariachi thing on top and the other bits and other bits, it's marvellous. But it's a band playing, it's not session musicians. So it gives it, an edge.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it, and that's what we do at our best. So I think, yeah, you're right. There is a connection between. We took a few diversions in between, but we got there. I think there's a connection between Chained and Journey to You.
And then there's two songs we've not mentioned yet. Shake It Off is one, which is kind of from the same wheelhouse as Feels Like a New Morning, the title track, I think. It's kind of upbeat, funky.
Yeah.
It's got single written all over it, and indeed the remixes and stuff. I mean, yeah, this is actually, thinking about it, the remixes of Shake It Off, I could be wrong, but it feels like that's the first time you've done those kind of 12-inch style remixes for a little while by that point. Do you remember if there was any sort of thinking about that? Was that something to do with Cherry Red? Did they say, let's have some remixes of something? And that's what happened.
I think they were friends of Nev's. I think the guy that did the mixes were a connection that Nev had, because when we broke up the band initially in 1990, Nev went into production and he made a lot of connections. He was working with All Saints and people like that. He was doing all sorts. All Saints, not all sorts. He was doing
I hope he wasn't doing All Saints literally.
He was doing Nicholas All Saints. And so yeah, he had connections to get those kind of mixes done. Because I was out of that, I wasn't my thing. But yeah, they're nice. It was good. It was good fun to get. I had no idea what that takes anymore, really. But it was good fun. And then what was the other one we haven't talked about? Right at the end.
Well, right at the end, you've got Hold Everything Dear. Okay, so there's two things about this. One, from a production and a sort of songwriting and a songwritery playing the song point of view, this is something very different, really. It sounds like the kind of thing that Brian Eno might have done. There's definitely an Eno influence on it. It's got that sort of, you've built the song out of some kind of sonic structure rather than sort of musicianship going on there. I mean, I tell you what it feels like. Going back to what you were saying about in No Time at All, where you took the main vocal off and just left the backing vocal on. Hold Everything Dear feels like you played a song and then took all the regular instruments off and left the backing instruments. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah. The truth of it is that I just played it on a harmonium, which is a pump organ.
Yeah.
In Wales, at a certain point, in all the Welsh Methodist chapels, they sold off the harmoniums for like 20 quid a pop, because that's what they used to have in the Methodist chapels. They wouldn't have a big organ. They'd have these. You know what I'm talking about? These ones where you with your feet, and and Laurie had loads of these because he'd been picking them up from the local Methodist chapels. So I just played one. And of course you can't tune anything to it because it's out of tune. It's in tune with itself, but you can't tune it to, unless you do some shenanigans in the computer and all that. And I wasn't.
Right.
So I thought, well, okay, they'd all gone home actually. I was mixing, and I was just playing with the pump organ and said, just let's have a go. So I just played it and sang it at the same time. So that's why there's nothing much on it, and that's all it is. Just made it.
Oh, wow.
I had the lyric. I had a kind of acoustic version of it somewhere. Might put it out sometime. But that was that's how that one came really. So it's just me not being able to play very well. I mean, it's a pump organ, so you have to keep it going all the time and playing chords and singing something new. I mean, But I thought I like those kind of odd songs that end albums.
Yeah, I was going to say this either had to be first or last, and clearly it wasn't going to be first given the sort of tone of the song. So
it was first. A lot of people might not have gone any further. You know?
I don't think that's quite true.
Because I remember we did one on Devil's Tavern that always made me laugh. When Love's in Bloom.
Yes.
Which is the very last, which has got a similar kind of thing. It's kind of, it just makes me laugh because when Love's in Bloom is such the band couldn't get it at all. Nev couldn't get the thing. It was so funny in the studio. But it was another one of those strange songs to end albums with.
Yeah, because it's nice just to do something for yourself, to try something new out, completely new, different.
It's also to leave a question mark at the end, I think, to leave a little bit of, okay, no, what? Let's go back. I've always liked that.
Yeah, almost as if to say, come back for the next album to see what happens next, because, this is a journey. The whole career is a journey, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and there's definitely an element of, well, you think you got a sus, but you don't. There's more. There's different things, I mean, I'm in that process now. We're coming out of Journey to You, and I think Journey to You was a pinnacle for us in some ways of us doing that sound. That's definitely 100% Blow Monkeys. But I'm not going to do that again because I couldn't do it again. There's no point.
Yeah.
But I want to make another Blow Monkeys thing, so it has to be different. Quite a lot different in this case. So because, and also, I mean, who cares? I mean, I've got no great audience expectation. We've got a hardcore audience, and thank God for that, because it makes it worthwhile making records, and we sell enough to make it worthwhile for everyone and make another one, and that's about as good as it gets, isn't it? I mean, that's great. So,
and your hardcore audience who followed you and the band will have had everything from, She Was Only a Grocer's Daughter to Out There, probably in their collection.
Yeah.
And so they'll know the full gamut of the things that you do.
Yeah, and some won't. Some will only have picked up on new things. And we got, all the big things. And Journey to You touched them, because I can see that on, things, the certain songs like Time Storm and Crying for the Moon have kind of jumped up into that zone that people that might have listened to Digging and Be This Way have heard and recognised as us. So that's quite nice, because I can see that live, But it's time to take a left turn, I think.
Speaking of recognisably you, I did mention before we started that I might bring this up. Hold Everything Dear has got this weird thing, and I don't know if this is a Scottish thing, but when you're doing it, and this is the first time I've ever heard you do it, so I don't know where it quite came from, and your description of singing it live as you're playing, this pump organ thing, maybe as the explanation, you do this thing where you roll your R's, which is like a Scottish thing, which I've never heard you do. And of course, one of the things that's kind of distinctive, I suppose, about the Blow Monkeys that I don't even notice, I've heard your record so many times, is your pronunciation of the letter R. I've got to ask, do you think that's been good for your career in that it's a distinction that people associate with you? Or do you think maybe in some ways also it's maybe one of those things that maybe is a reason why you don't get played on the radio so much? Or is it something you even take any notice of yourself?
The last option is the correct answer.
All right, fair enough.
I noticed, first of all, the idea that they wouldn't play us on the radio because I can't pronounce my R's. I don't think that's. I'm not the only one. Put it that way.
Yes, for sure. True.
We used to have a joke when we first started. I had a red Rickenbacker. So it was Robert's red Rickenbacker. No, it's not. It's of no consequence whatsoever in terms of the career. I don't think, but it is. It does. It is recognisably me, and also
Because I don't even know if you
Scottish
even
thing. I
do
mean,
it anymore.
you know, there has been a. I mean, I was born in Scotland, although you can tell that I left early on. My mum, my sister, I grew up listening to Scottish folk tunes. There was definitely when I went up to last time I was in Edinburgh, we played the Liquid Rooms. I said to Neb as the first encore, we had family out there. I had family from Edinburgh. I said, I'm just going to go and do this. Come with me. Let's go and do Wild Mountain Thyme, Scottish folk song, you know, and it was really, and I thought it could have gone badly, but it didn't. And by the first verse, they were all singing along.
Wow.
And then we did our other encores, and I think the writer Ian Rankin was there that night, and he wrote he wrote a thing on about it saying the only band that could get away with encoring with Wild Mountain Thyme into Superfly, and I guess that's right there. Kind of tells you what we're about, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything in between there.
Yeah, totally. Because because even though you left so young, I do think because of the fact that you came from there, I think you make associations and I think you do absorb things.
Oh, definitely. I mean, my great-grandfather was from Roscommon in Ireland. So there's a Celtic folk thing that's very deep. I find it very emotionally moving, that music. You know, I've got a good friend here in Spain who's moved here in the last couple of years, the writer called Barry McElhenney, and he loves Van Morrison, but he also loves things like Raglan Road, and you know, he sings all these kind of Irish folk tunes, and I just love listening to them and playing guitar and listening to the words, and there's something a deep connection for me within that art form that comes out sometimes in my writing, but not very often. You can hear it in things like Circular Quay, or you can hear it in some of the Sky is Falling. You know, there are some things like that. In the same way that the gospel thing is very deep, I don't really analyze it too much. It's just that I know that I love that music. So it's not going the sort of the Scottish pronunciations. Well, that's all right. I'm allowed to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they don't like it, fuck them.
Right, one very last question before I make a suggestion for next time.
Yeah.
Why not grab it? Grab it for the viewer.
All right.
So, no, in fact, have I picked up the right one? Yeah. Came out at roughly the same time. Can I get it to... It's the 3-disc compilation that came out at roughly the same time as this.
Yes.
Was that part of the deal? Was it a kind of a, let's do all these things together? Or was it just that they were happy, everybody was happy, they said...
That's Sony.
So it had nothing to do with...
No, nothing to do with Cherry Red. It just so happened to come out at the same time.
Oh, so that's coincidence?
Yes.
Oh, wow. But there must have been something in the air then in that year. Because that's not just sort of one of these sort of, let's bung out another compilation of the Blow Monkeys because, you know, there should be but that's a proper big retrospective with a live album in there as well. So there was definitely something in the water at the time. Maybe.
I have no idea. I'm when it comes to that kind of corporate thing, I'm lost because I don't even know who owns us anymore. You know, you don't own me. Funnily enough, it being quite appropriate, but as a song. But anyway, they wanted to do something with. They said they had this live album, and I thought, oh my god, it's quite early on that live album, but it's quite interesting. Yeah. It makes me laugh to listen to it. And then you know, they wanted to put my solo stuff on it, so yeah, they did a nice job.
Yeah, that is a lovely actual. I mean, because clearly, obviously, I've got all those songs in other places pretty much, but I guess apart from the live album, but it's still a lovely thing to have.
Yeah.
Right, a suggestion for next time then, because as long as we keep up the pace of this, the next one's going to be Christmas. And so, as soon as it's Christmas, we should do something where instead of talking about yourself, you talk about other people. But because, of course, we want you to talk about yourself too, my suggestion for our next podcast is the album Other Folk,
Yeah.
in which, by accident almost, because you alluded to it briefly in one of our previous conversations, and you can tell the story next time, it's kind of a covers album. Not quite entirely a covers album, but it's kind of a covers album. So that will allow us the chance to sort of talk about some of your favourite songs at the same time as, you know, talking about the recording process again, I suppose.
Yeah, look forward to it, JR.
Brilliant. Other Folk next time then, and then it'll be Christmas, and then we'll do something else afterwards. Thank you, Robert. Once again, this has been a fantastic conversation.
All right, thanks, JR.